August 1946, Paris, the Royal Mossow Hotel. David Ben-Gurion, now the undisputed leader of the Zionists, is addressing his leading lieutenants. The shrewd Zionist leader is explaining his scheme for the future of Palestine. The hardliner Zionists had been wedded securely to the Biltmore program of 1942, put forward by Ben-Gurion himself, which had dictated that all of mandatory Palestine be transformed into Israel, by force if necessary. Then there were the doves, who were ready to compromise and settle for a much smaller portion of Palestine. At Paris, Ben-Gurion unveiled a scheme in between these two extremes. He declared that getting 80% of Palestine would be sufficient. Given the fact that the Jews were only 30% of Palestine's population, Ben-Gurion knew that digesting even 80% of Palestine wouldn't be an easy task at all. Soon after, the Jewish Agency published and distributed maps of Palestine depicting Ben-Gurion's vision. Ben-Gurion wasn't a prophet, but his map was proven prophetic. 2 years later, when the Israel that emerged out of the First Arab-Israeli War corresponded exactly to the boundaries drawn by Ben-Gurion in Paris in 1946. I am Dr. Hassan Bukhari, and this is the 10th episode of our series, Palestine versus Israel. The borders drawn by Ben-Gurion at Paris included areas in which 80% of the 1.25 million Palestinian Arabs lived. How could an exclusively Zionist state be created in which the Jews would be heavily outnumbered by the indigenous Arabs? For Ben-Gurion, the solution was simple, though not easy. He had purposely left 20% of Palestine, that is the West Bank and Gaza, to the Arabs so that the bulk of the Arab population could be settled there. But how would the Arabs be pushed into these two ghetto-like enclaves? Unlike wise men, Ben-Gurion had no qualms and no doubts. That is why he had been able to supplant wise men as the Zionist chief at this critical stage of the movement. The Arabs could only be pushed out by force, and Ben-Gurion wanted to create and apply adequate force to make this happen. With the outbreak of violence in December 1947, the Haganah drafted a plan to put Ben-Gurion's vision into reality. This plan was codenamed Plan Dalet, or simply Plan D. Under Ben-Gurion's direction, the plan was finalized in March 1948, just as the Zionists were about to receive significant shipments of weapons from abroad. Plan Dalet was not some vague outline given to commanders. It was a crystal clear plan for genocide with little latitude given to brigade commanders. According to Ilan Pape, each brigade commander received a list of the villages or neighborhoods that had to be occupied, destroyed, and their inhabitants expelled, with exact dates. Plan Dalet was launched on the 1st of April 1948. On the same date, the Zionists received their first major shipment of arms from Czechoslovakia, courtesy of the Soviet Union. The Zionists' enviable position of simultaneously being the darling of both the USA and the USSR was paying huge dividends. One day before, Ben-Gurion had met his Zionist shadow cabinet and finalized the directives issued to Zionist military units under Plan Dalet. The orders stated, "The principal objective of the operation is the destruction of Arab villages and the eviction of the villagers so that they would become an economic liability for the general Arab forces." In this way, Plan Dalet aimed to kill two birds with one stone. It was aiming to remove the Arab majority from 80% of Palestine and in the process destabilize the Arab war effort with a flood of refugees. Zionist military operations under Plan Dalet achieved significant success. The disorganized Arab resistance was no match for the better organized and numerically superior Zionist forces. There was some belated cooperation between the forces of Abdul Qadir al-Husseini and Fauzi al-Qawqji at this critical stage, as the latter sent some artillery pieces and soldiers to help defend Jerusalem and Jaffa in the central Palestine zone. But a grave blow was dealt to the Arabs when Abdul Qadir al-Husseini was killed while bravely leading his troops at the Battle of Kastal on 8th of April. His death demoralized the Arab resistance, and the Zionists occupied many villages in the vicinity of Jerusalem and opened the Jerusalem-Tel Aviv road. One of the villages occupied by the Zionists in the wake of Abdul Qadir al-Husseini's death was Deir Yassin. On the 9th of April, a Zionist force belonging to the Irgun and the Stern gang attacked Deir Yassin despite the fact that the village had a non-aggression pact with the Haganah. This brazen attack was ordered in pursuit of the objectives laid out in Plan Dalet. Both the Irgun and the Stern gang were operating in coordination with Haganah at that time. This appalling breach of faith was followed by a much more grotesque episode. About 115 men, women, and children were mercilessly slaughtered. Many women were raped before their murder, and even the bodies were mutilated. In their book, The Saga of the Deir Yassin Massacre, Revisionism and Reality, Daniel McGowan and Matthew Hogan have written, as they burst into the village, the Jewish soldiers sprayed the houses with machine gun fire, killing many of the inhabitants. The remaining villagers were then gathered in one place and murdered in cold blood, their bodies abused, while a number of the women were raped and then killed. This wanton slaughter of unarmed civilians was in keeping with the Zionist military ethics, as they regarded every Palestinian as an enemy soldier and every Palestinian village as an enemy stronghold. Deir Yassin was by no means the only horrific massacre carried out by Zionist forces, but it became the most well known. It was just a part of a great strategy, actually. The Zionists knew that unlike the Nazis, they didn't have the capability to kill 1 million Palestinians and burn their bodies in crematoriums. They were outnumbered by the Palestinians 2 to 1. Had they attempted to kill all Palestinian Arabs Holocaust style, not only would they have engendered a fierce will to resist among the Palestinians, but they would also have risked severe global backlash. They also wanted to absolve themselves of the crime of genocide by creating the myth that the Palestinians had left their lands of their own accord. So they crafted a cunning strategy based on psychological tactics. After committing some horrible massacres like Deir Yassin, in which hundreds were murdered, the Zionists used mobile loudspeakers and word of mouth to magnify their own savagery in the eyes of the Arabs. Loudspeakers appeared outside Arab villages and warned them to leave quickly or prepare for another Deir Yassin. The hapless and defenseless Arabs started fleeing in a panic with their families. According to Israeli historian Benny Morris, Deir Yassin had a profound demographic and political effect. It was followed by a mass flight of Arabs from their locales. Menachem Begin, the leader of the Irgun and the criminal chiefly responsible for Deir Yassin, proudly wrote in his book, The Revolt, Arabs throughout the country, induced to believe wild tales of Irgun butchery, were seized with limitless panic and started to flee for their lives. This mass flight soon developed into a maddened, uncontrolled stampede. Of the almost 800,000 who lived on the present territory of the State of Israel, only some 165,000 are still there. The political and economic significance of this development can hardly be overestimated. Historian Charles Smith observed, Zionist psychological warfare and terror tactics, which included the destruction of villages and the ousting of their populations, combined to produce a state of panic that resulted in the flight of over 300,000 Arabs by May 15. From the beginning of April to mid-May, when the State of Israel emerged on the world map, a storm of fire and iron was unleashed on the Arabs of Palestine under Plan Dalet. Arab cities fell one after the other, and their Arab inhabitants were forced to flee for their lives. Tiberias, Haifa, Bisan, Safed, and Jaffa fell respectively on 18 April, 23 April, 11 May, 12 May, and 13 May. 100,000 Arabs from Haifa, 60 to 70,000 from Jaffa, 10,000 from Safed, 6,000 from Bisan, and 5,500 from Tiberias were promptly expelled. 30,000 Arabs from West Jerusalem also met the same fate. By the 15th of May, the Zionists had captured Haifa, Jaffa, Acre, West Jerusalem, and all of Galilee. It mattered little to them that many of these areas were supposedly part of the future Palestinian state according to the UN partition plan, through which the state of Israel was deriving its international legitimacy. Interestingly, Deir Yassin, the village that became the symbol of the Arab genocide, was located 18 miles outside the borders of Israel as per the UN partition plan. Rashid Khalidi writes in his book The 100 Years' War on Palestine, Jaffa was besieged and ceaselessly bombarded with mortars and harassed by snipers. Once finally overrun by Zionist forces during the first weeks of May, it was systematically emptied of most of its 60,000 Arab residents. Although Jaffa was meant to be part of the stillborn Arab state designated by the 1947 partition plan, no international actor attempted to stop this major violation of the UN resolution. I have used the word genocide a few times in this discourse. I haven't used this term lightly because Zionist actions do fit the bill perfectly if the UN definition of genocide is accepted. Section C of the UN definition clearly declares that deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about such physical destruction in whole or in part amounts to genocide. Hence, the ethnic cleansing of Palestine is a clear-cut case of willful genocide. There are other clear signs as well. For instance, Ilan Pappe has written at length about the Zionist psychological move of dehumanizing the Palestinians in order to enable their ethnic cleansing and justifying it to themselves as a righteous act. The Zionist lie that the Palestinians voluntarily left their homes is too shallow to be taken seriously, but remarkably, it has been taken seriously enough in the West. Many historians had to do meticulous research to conclusively prove this Zionist assertion a lie. But such is the grip of Zionists on discourse inside Israel and the West that this lie is still propagated and believed by many. Nevertheless, the fact of the matter was expressed curtly by Charles Smith, who declared, "Scholarly debate over the flight of Palestinians no longer questions the fact that Zionist Israeli forces forcibly expelled the majority of the refugees." Another proof of the Zionist policy of genocide and ethnic cleansing is the fact that they never let the Arabs return to their homes after they had voluntarily left. For example, after only 10 days of the Zionist capture of Haifa, many Arabs requested the Zionist authorities for permission to return. The Arab states also backed this request, but the Zionists flatly refused. On May 14, 1948, as the British completed their withdrawal from Palestine, Ben-Gurion declared the independence of the Zionist state of Israel. If there were to be any doubts about this state's legitimacy, given the fact that it had gobbled up many Palestinian areas as per the UN partition plan, they were quashed by the prompt de facto recognition of Israel by the Zionist sympathizer US President Harry Truman. The Soviet Union, also willing to court the favor of the Zionists, extended de jure recognition to Israel soon after. With the backing of both world powers, the Zionist dagger had firmly been plunged into the heart of the Arab world and the Islamic State. The birth of Israel and the stillbirth of a Palestinian Arab state resulted in the outbreak of the First Arab-Israeli War a day later. At the end of this episode, I will briefly examine the causes behind the spectacular Zionist success and the abysmal Arab performance. Arab disunity proved to be Israel's greatest ally in this struggle. The callousness of some execrable Arab individuals can be judged from an episode narrated by Jaffa attorney Muhammad Nimr al-Hawari. Hawari was active in the Palestinian resistance, and according to him, many purchasing agents of the Arab League's military committee bought weapons at cheap prices from Cairo and then sold them to Palestinians for unconscionable profits. These faithless men made fortunes at a time when the Palestinian nation was staring at demise and genocide. Apart from a few attempts by Abdul Qadir al-Husseini and Fawzi al-Kawukji, no Arab leader made any effort to develop unity and synergy. Abdul Qadir's early death put an end to whatever little cooperation was present between rival Arab factions. As for King Abdullah of Jordan and his Nashashibi allies, they were happy to see both the Husseinis and Kawukji's Arab Liberation Army torn to shreds by the Zionists. Abdullah wanted his Arab rivals neutralized in order to make his deal of partitioning Palestine with the Zionists possible. Both the Zionists and Abdullah didn't want an independent Palestine to emerge, and the latter's treachery to the Arab cause played a huge role in the achievement of this objective. In addition to Arab disunity, their military capabilities and discipline left much to be desired as well. Mutinies and desertions were frequent in both the Husseini forces and the Arab Liberation Army. Unlike the Zionists, the Arabs didn't possess a central military command or a civilian governing executive. Instead of providing leadership, the Arab elite was the first to flee when the Zionists began their offensive. Like the rogue weapon traders, the elite was solely concerned with its own well-being. Historian David Gilmour summarized this situation aptly. The defense of Palestine in pre-15 May stage was undertaken by the villagers themselves, who defended their homes as best as they could with antiquated weaponry. There was no strategy, no coordination between them. They had been disgracefully deserted by their leaders, most of whom were living in safety in Beirut, Cairo, and Damascus. Only two members of the Arab Higher Committee, Ahmad Hilmi and Dr. Hussein Fakhri Khalidi, remained in Palestine during the war. Only one Jerusalem notable, Abdul Qadir al-Husseini, took part in the fighting. Lastly, there was the overwhelming global support for the Zionists, which ensured that if they had run into difficulties on the battlefield, they would be promptly bailed out by their foreign benefactors. The Soviet Union became the chief supplier of weapons to the Zionists, while its rival, the United States of America, practically worked so much in sync with the Zionists that the latter themselves were a bit surprised. In an interview with Moshe Perlman, David Ben-Gurion mentioned his last meeting with Truman and recalled, "I told him that as a foreigner I could not judge what would be his place in American history, but his helpfulness to us, his constant sympathy with our aims in Israel, his courageous decision to recognize our new state so quickly, and his steadfast support since then had given him an immortal place in Jewish history." In the next episode of Palestine versus Israel, we will discuss the First Arab-Israeli War in detail. Stay tuned, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel.